The Texans go down to the Giants, as you would have expected, and as you would have also expected. The Texans hung around longer than most people outside of Houston expect them to, but that's what this team does. They play conservatively enough, and they eke along just fine to not get destroyed. And they're close in the fourth quarter, but it never really feels like they're as close as the scoreboard says they are. That's what happened. But this is the rule this year, is that you cannot ignore in tanking what you would otherwise address in normal defeat. In a normal year, after a loss like this, if you were still in playoff contention, you might say things like, hey, Jalen Petrie, that's guy number one that we're not going to ignore in tanking because these young players need to develop. We're trying to develop these young players, and it's like trying to raise a nun in a whorehouse when you have such a bad environment and such bad surroundings. You have these guys playing with bad habits. Jalen Petrie is one of those guys. He has a lot of potential. He could be very, very, very good. He needs to figure out the tackling side of things. It's just unacceptable. And I think on a better defense, on a better football team, it would be addressed more aggressively. You wouldn't be able to get away with it. And I don't want to see this kid wasted because right now the good parts of him are very good. I think he's instinctive. I think he's very intelligent. I think he has the right kind of attitude. He plays with a lot of energy and a huge motor. He just has to tackle better. It's not as simple as just excusing it because they don't tackle in practice anymore in the NFL. Nobody tackles in practice anymore, but lots of guys are tackling well. It's because they work at it. And there are ways to work at it that, frankly, Lovie Smith's got to teach him, or Jalen Petrie just got to go out and get on YouTube and figure it out for himself. Ronnie Lott practiced for the San Francisco 49ers, played for the 49ers, but they practiced in no pads. Bill Walsh was a revolutionary in that regard, and they didn't have any problem hitting people hard and form tackling. Ronnie Lott go back and watch a Ronnie Lott highlight reel. All of his hits were actually legal by today's standards. People will say, like, oh, Ronnie Lott wouldn't be able to play in today's game. No. His hits were legal, and he form tackled as he was hitting people, and he did all of that while not actually practicing in pads. He had a whole bunch of different things he did to do it. Jalen Petrie needs to get on that train really, really quick because he could be really, really good. And I don't want to waste Jalen Petrie to this lost Texans season. It's a bad environment. They're seeing too many negative things and being influenced poorly. So Jalen Petrie, we saw the bad tackle, the missed tackle that led to the long run. Other guys on that play were playing with poor leverage. You got to get over that. You got to get better by next season when hopefully the Texans start to turn the corner. The linebackers, another thing we're not going to ignore in tanking that we would otherwise address in normal defeat. The linebackers, specifically Christian Harris, and two things. And I thought Charles Davis, the commentator, did a really good job of pointing this out in the game. One, on play action, these guys just bite so hard and they just abdicate their responsibilities behind them. That's why you get those wide open swaths of green for tight ends to catch balls over the middle. That's on the safeties as well. They need to get better at anticipating some of that. So you got laxness on both sides of the coverage equation there, and that's why you get guys wide open. The other thing is leverage in the run game and where they fit. It's hard as a linebacker when you don't have a good picture in front of you because the defensive line isn't playing that well, to understand exactly how to fit and where you fit in a run defense. It's also hard when the guys next to you aren't fitting in as well as they should in the run fits. And I think Christian Harris, who is a rookie and is making mistakes in his own regard, also ASAP needs to get surrounded by better players so he can really come into his own. I think he's got a lot of potential. He has a lot of plays that he uses his hands real well. He plays with physicality. He's got good instincts and a good football IQ. He's just got to be around better people. Dameon Pierce, number 3 guy and issue that we can't ignore in tanking is, I think, as long as he stays healthy, Dameon Pierce can be a very good running back in the NFL. He can't fumble. You just flat out can't fumble. You fumbled 3 times this year, twice in one game against the Bears, and I think he was hard on himself after that. The Texans were lucky enough not to lose those fumbles, but they did hurt them because he lost the ball in that game. But he lost this fumble down on the goal line when at the very least you're taking 3 points off the board. He's better than that. I don't question whether he's going to address it, but we got to point it out right now because otherwise you're just being some lazy, slack-ass tanking team that just doesn't care, and you end up being like the Browns, for instance, where you tank and tank and tank, and then all of a sudden you've got a bunch of good players but no culture. And that's why it's harder to tank in the NFL. The culture, the learned knowledge from the guys who are older than you, all of those things are real. And it's hard if you're in a position of no winning ever to kind of get reinforced for the good habits. In baseball, like with the Astros, hey, the Astros minor league players, Carlos Correa and those guys, they got to play on some really good AAA teams. So a lot of their good habits were being reinforced as they were playing on good AA and AAA teams before they got to major leagues. And then, everything kind of turned, and you were able to cultivate those guys. The interior offensive line, and obviously specifically Kenyon Green, I'll give Kenyon a little bit of a break here because he's faced a gauntlet of really tough defensive tackles over these last 3 weeks. It's been a really good learning experience for Kenyon Green, and I think he has shown improvement. The positive with Kenyon is that his good snaps are very good. His bad snaps, what I'm hoping is a result of him trying to learn to play with technique instead of just mauling people. So he's had to learn how to play a bit more conservatively. I was about to say passively, but that's not really the right word. But you can't just go maul and attack NFL players all the time because you're going to run into some dudes that are just flat out not going to be having it. And you've got to learn how to use technique and savvy. He is doing that. I think he's going to be fine. At center and right guard, obviously, they're going to need upgrades. They got to do that in free agency. If you draft Bryce Young or somebody like that, then ultimately it's you got to have that center and right guard hemmed up, which I suppose brings us to Davis Mills. Can we continue to ignore some of Davis Mills' flaws, or are you like apparently 7% of the people, according to a poll I ran, are open to Davis Mills being the starting quarterback next year? This is the issue I have with Davis Mills. It's that you could blame some things on Pep Hamilton. You can't blame all things on Pep Hamilton, particularly Davis Mills' preference for the underneath safer route, which isn't even always the safer route. And I'll show you this Chris Moore pass attempt to Chris Moore that should have been Brandon Cook's touchdown. The issue you got to run into with Davis Mills is Pep Hamilton, you might have issues or question him as an offensive coordinator. I have my reservations and questions about Pep Hamilton. But Pep Hamilton has worked with Andrew Luck and he's worked with Justin Herbert as rookies, and neither of those guys were overly conservative because they were working with Pep Hamilton. This is a character trait of Davis Mills. Can he overcome it? Perhaps. I don't know. Like, is he going to be Geno Smith and eventually blossom and come into his own 10 years from now? Perhaps. I don't want that to be the Texans' issue or decision. So maybe he sticks around and figures it out over time. Right now, what I've seen is him loosening up when the Texans are behind, and he's almost given that free pass to be aggressive and let loose. Maybe he figures that out over the course of the next half season. I personally am veering more towards that's just his personality. He's a paint-by-numbers type of guy. He's like an engineer out there trying to be a race car driver. You know, you don't want your race car driver to usually be your engineer and vice versa, and that's what it feels like right now. I've got my engineer. I don't want my engineer trying to take over a social media platform. Something, two different complete entities, different management structures and styles. Genius doesn't always transfer. So whichever way you want to go with that analogy is what I would say. And just for fun, O.J. Howard, just what the hell is O.J. Howard doing? O.J. Howard on this Jordan Akins pass, and he's not somebody that I'm worried about being here long term, but I think maybe as a cautionary tale, O.J. Howard is the guy where you say, wow, had all the physical tools and traits, but there's just something missing. There's something off. And I think becoming a spectator and a cheerleader instead of an actual blocker, when you have guys in front of you that you can block on a play, those are kind of big deals. So watch out for that. I think Caserio does have a pretty good feel for the difference between a guy who's a great combine guy versus a guy who's an actual football player. I have been pleased with that so far, so I'm not going to totally 100% freak out about that. More to come. I'm going to do I'll be putting out a video at 11 a.m. Central, 12 p.m. Eastern every single day that I can. We'll do some live streams in longer form, but I just wanted to get that out here today, and if I can enlist some help from people with actual video editing skills, we'll add some video to this. I meant to do video over for a lot of those things right there, but a lot actually good to take away from this. I'm getting a little bit frustrated and worn down by the length of this awful season so far, now that I don't have the Astros to distract me, and the Rockets aren't much of a distraction either. But we will persevere, my friends. I believe in you. I know that you're here for the duration. You will survive the hard reset /tank/bludgeoning that we're undergoing right now. Good day.